recording now, and I'll explain to you what it is I'm doing. So, what I have been focusing on in my work, in my artwork, is time, which is a huge, massive concept.
Yeah.
But narrowing it down, it's becoming narrower and narrower, and now I'm thinking more on missing time that isn't there.
Okay.
So I've explored a number of things. I went to University of Kent and spoke to a professor of physics there. I rang him up and said, "Hey, can I come and talk to you about time?" And I went in thinking I knew that much. And I came,
Yes.
I came out. He was brilliant. And it was so, he gave me an hour. It's absolutely fantastic. But I came out just absolutely, but it was absolutely brilliant. Anyway, so when I say missing time, I mean things like, I don't know if you remember, but like the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, is shot on a 45-degree shutter. So of available 360, only 45 degrees are used, which gives it that very jerky, frenetic feeling.
Yeah.
But then that also means that 7/8 of each 25th of a second isn't there. It's not. It's like, what happened to it? Where did that time go? Right? I'm not asking you to think about that. Thinking about memories. All right, now I realise that memories are something of a construct anyway, that every time I recall something, I'll recall it to suit. I'll remember it one way for you and another way for Mum.
Yeah.
And stuff. But as we die, as we shut down, what's happening to memories? In what way do they degrade?
So I suppose that's a...
You know,
I've got to preface by saying there's no hard answers here because we don't know for sure what a memory is. Right. And so moving away from the physics side of time and towards the more anaesthetic side, we know we can give you medications whilst we're doing a procedure.
Yes.
And you can be talking to someone and having quite a rational conversation with them.
But not be awake.
And
so
at the end, they will go, "Oh yeah, no, I remember you saying you were giving me an injection, and then I remember being in recovery afterwards. Absolutely no memory of that time in between." And that I always think is a weird thing, that you're there going, and we give people analgesia and stuff whilst they're in that sort of sedated period, and we know they're not going to be forming memories, but it's a very odd sensation to be having a conversation with someone knowing full well they seem superficially present,
but they're not.
But they're clearly, well, I suppose there's a philosophical argument there about, are you present if is memory what defines you being present? Because it doesn't, if you don't remember it doesn't affect what you do in future, so it's not really part of you. But that's a very retrospective view on it, isn't it? Whereas at the time, they are responding as they would, largely as they would if you hadn't given them that stuff, and they would remember it. So they're responding with all the things that have accumulated to make them themselves at that point.
Yeah.
So it's you almost get this sort of little branching of personalities thing, and you snip off the one that, when when they wake up, that when they start making memories again, that little bit where they've been going along sort of parallel paths, one's been turned off for a bit, and then it sort of jumps around. It's a slightly odd feeling, but then memories.
How do they degrade? Not when you're dying. Let's just say that now I remember every instant of our lunch, and I could, at a push, maybe reproduce all the conversations we had. At a push. I'm not. You know what I mean, roughly. Yeah. In 5 years' time,
you'd be lucky if you remember that we had lunch at all. Yeah. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? So, I suppose we do. There's a lot that we don't know that's just very supposition. We know how the heart works because it's basically a mechanical pump, and that's quite easy to go, okay, yeah, I can see that. Not really got much of a clue how the brain works. Like most of the drugs we give in anaesthetics, people go, "Oh, how does this work?" And you kind of go, "Yeah, we don't actually know." We know it makes you fall asleep. We don't really know why and what mechanically
is going on to make you
fall asleep. We don't really know what sleep is as a thing, which is bizarre. But
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's it's a highly technical field and all of that lot, but also we're essentially winging it and going, well, we've done this before and this has worked, so we're going to keep doing it. Not got a clue why though, which I find amazing. But so I guess we do know that when you have an experience, that direct sensory input gets translated to short-term memory where it's stored, and then a lot, particularly when you sleep, that short-term memory sort of buffer then gets filtered and converted to long-term memory, and you filter out a lot of the sort of the meaningless crap, like what colour shirt someone was wearing when they walked past you during the day, whereas more important stuff gets laid down.
You remember you saw them, but maybe not what their shirt was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess we know there is a sort of a daily cycle of storing, filtering, processing, and shifting to longer term memory, but
does longer term memory fill up?
Wow.
And need to be sort of like a hard drive.
I mean, it's probably not.
I mean, I know that's a bit crap to say that, but you know what I mean.
There's probably an element of it, because probably through however many more layers there are to it, memory is a function of connections between neurons, and so whether we ever reach that limit is a different question, but there will be a hard limit somewhere to the amount of information a human brain can retain. But then there's also sort of complicating that it's not. I don't think you can say that actually you just shouldn't learn things that aren't definitely important to you, because there's also the whole thing that the brain acts a lot like a muscle, and if you use it, in the same way that muscles get bigger and form stronger and more fibres, you get more connections forming between neurons as you use your brain. So there's probably some suggestion that actually particularly the more things you learn from different areas, the more connections you get between different areas of your brain, which probably facilitates better recall and better retention of memories. So there's an element of, there probably is a hard limit somewhere, but the limiting factor to people generally isn't the hard drive is full. It's probably more a case of your connection from hard drive to back to your computer for accessing it is becoming less less able.
I think of images degrading in a number of different ways. Like a photograph, like there's probably one in here, might fade till it sort of gradually, there's nothing there. Or on VHS tapes, for instance, sometimes you'd lose, goodness knows why, probably due to a tracking error, the bottom half of the picture would disappear.
Yeah.
But you still have the top half, but not the bottom half.
And it's interesting that memories don't degrade in that sense.
That's what I mean.
And I think that's part of it. So because you're using, quite often you'll hear about people saying, there can be a smell or a sound that evokes really vivid photographic memories that aren't directly necessarily linked to that. But I think that's probably a function of the whole thing of, your brain forming links between different areas. And, if it's purely, say, a visual link, and you're looking at something and going, yeah, I remember seeing something that looks similar to that, that's, you're effectively going, it's all visual, memory to visual cortex to memory. That's going back and forth across one path to store and then access that memory. Whereas if you see something whilst smelling some distinctive smell, that's then two inputs to that memory.
So the smell might kick off that memory.
Exactly, which then effectively means you can kind of trigger either of the two options, or both of them, to then go, oh yeah, and pull that memory back. And this is all a bit.
No. That's
I can't.
Come on, says what
can't
I'm
do this
doing.
with any level of expertise, but it's sort of from a very sort of vague.
What about? Here's another thing. Dad had dug out a whole bunch of Super 8s and stuff for ages, and I had them on a VHS, and I hadn't looked at them for ages, and they were an American VHS, and I was like, you know what, we're not going to be able to play this soon, so I'll go and get it digitised, and then got it digitised, and then watched it back. And half of it was footage of me, say, all the stuff up until about age 3.5, 4, I have zero memory of that time.
Yeah.
I have very good memories, very good compared to others in the family, of stuff after that. And I can remember very precise things. I can remember a lot of Spain and stuff. But this stuff, I'm always coming across people who go, oh yes, I can remember stuff from when I was 1.5. I can remember stuff. I cannot remember anything, I don't think, under about 4.5. Right. And so, but then seeing me in this footage was actually quite not disturbing, but discomforting, put it that way. Because you're like, I don't know.
And you start thinking, well, hang on, do I remember that? And the thing is, we're very suggestible.
Of course, yes.
And actually you hear stuff said enough times, you go, oh yeah, no, I think, and you remember seeing it or hearing it, but not actually remembering it firsthand. But my understanding is that memory does require a certain degree of understanding of self, which is a whole pot of worms there to delve into. And basically, young kids don't really have that same understanding of self.
Certainly not.
Until you've developed a bit more of your frontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got more of a personality and, a sort of an understanding of me now versus me then. And, that basically before that, you're essentially, in a whole stream of consciousness thing. Like that young kids' temporal reasoning is dreadful. So like if you do there was a really good experiment once where they basically got a bunch of kids and said, there's a sweet, but if you don't have it now, and if you wait, you can have 10 sweets later. Mm-hmm. And there's a very sharp dividing line around, I think it's about sort of 3 to 4-ish, where below that, all the kids go, yeah, there's a sweet there now. Mm-hmm. And they just can't do that sort of reasoning within time of, but I will get this later, and I'll still be me later, and I'll still want sweets, and I get more. It's just they don't have that sort of level of function yet to do that kind of reasoning. Like, yeah, but there's a sweet there now. Sweet there now. Have the sweet. And then you get above that age, and suddenly kids go, so 10, that's more sweet, and I just have to wait a bit. Yeah, I'll wait. But there's this really sharp cut-off where below that you get essentially no kids will sort of delay gratification. And, that's clearly an element of that is your sort of ability to conceptualise time. And kind of probably before that, it's all just sort of a bit of stream of consciousness. You exist
a flow
in the here and now, and you might, clearly you remember some things, but there's not the same conscious process. It's a bit more like sort of animal conditioning of, I won't go to that waterhole because there was a lion, but you're not. It's just a waterhole bad. No, it's kind of loose associations rather than a sort of a reasoning thing of, well, there was a lion at that waterhole, but actually that was during the dry season and they probably won't be there now.
But that's interesting you saying that, because it wasn't that long ago that I sort of really realised, just because I bothered to think about it, that if I think about the past, I'm thinking about the past now. If I'm thinking about the future, I'm thinking about the future now.
Yeah.
And if something's happening to me, it's happening now. So
yes,
there really
all you can ever really think about is
now, isn't there?
Your brain's projection of the past or the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of once you accept that actually
Yeah.
Everyone's memory is entirely fallible.
Yeah.
You can never talk about absolutes in either the past or the future. You can just go, well, this is what I think happened and what I think will happen, but yeah, it's all just your brain making up a bit of a light show for you.
That's really interesting.
But then equally, you can also very much argue that now is your brain making up a bit of a light show for you as well.
Yeah.
And actually, you aren't, you see, I can look at a table, I can feel a table, I can smell. You can't really do any of that.
And not just
your experience is such a highly processed form of the inputs you're getting. You can't feel a table. You can feel pressure, and that's it. And your brain's very good at interpreting tiny nuances in the pressure as you move your hand over something to go, oh, there's texture here. I'm combining that with, again, all you're saying, it's wavelengths of light in various patterns is all you're getting. And you then reconstruct that into, okay, this is an image that I'm then piecing together with my understanding of what a table is and what I felt and all those things. But you're not getting you don't experience your raw sensory input. You get a very highly editorialized version.
I remember reading this thing about how if there's a certain kind of fly that doesn't fly that fast and you try to go for it, so your brain is telling you now, but slightly teeny weeny bit ahead now, but you hardly ever get the fly because the fly has learned to switch direction, and the amount of time it takes the signal to get to your eye, the eye to process it, put it in the brain's always having to predict slightly ahead where it's going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was an interesting thing, thinking, oh, so my brain has told me that the fly's there, but it's not actually there, it actually switched direction.
No, exactly. And this is the other thing, is, about, reality is not entirely as you perceive it. The retina of your eye, and particularly the fovea where you've got the highest concentration of cone cells, gives you an area of focus where you can see things in, genuinely high detail. If you hold your arm out, I think it's supposed to be about that wide, and that is all you're seeing that is in clear detail, and then things further and further away you see in progressively lower and lower resolution and less colour. And, at any one time, if you look at a scene, all you are seeing is high detail area, blurs, getting progressively more blurry as you move out around it. And yet, that's not at all how we see the world. Your eye scans across and fills in gaps for you.
So it's like a compression thing, a reverse compression thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we're very good at.
Yeah, no, completely. Your eye flicks across, and then it goes, okay, yeah, I recognise these objects aren't moving, and so it basically just leaves those, your brain leaves those filled in when you look elsewhere. And so, we believe that we see the world in far higher resolution than we actually do, just because your brain's very, it's like a clever animation trick, really. It just fills in the gaps based,
We'll probably get back. Can I call you at some point and
sure.
ask you some more questions? Because I'm finding it really...
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you sure you don't mind? Because I'm finding it absolutely fascinating.
No, it's interesting stuff, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, yes. And I